So thank you all for joining. My name is Ramona Ortega. I am the CEO and founder of My Money, My Future. We are a platform that helps support millennials, in particular multicultural millennials, get access to the resources they need to make the best financial decisions. So we're super excited to be joined today by two of my sort of colleagues in the profession of both finance and law. Veronica Escobar, who is a sort of partner and principal at Veronica Escobar Law offices here in Brooklyn. Is that right? Are you in Brooklyn?
No, Queens and Manhattan.
Queens and Manhattan. And Renee Cohen, who's joining us from Los Angeles, and who's a financial expert and also an expert in insurance. And so we are excited today to be talking primarily about sort of some of the issues that we've seen with COVID recently. I mean, look, I'm in Brooklyn, I'm in ground zero. The death rate has been sort of, moving up every day. It's real, folks. I mean, people my age, I'm going to be 45 on Saturday. I'm literally prime target at this point, so I'm staying put. But it's not only me. I think about my parents. I think about people who have elderly parents right now, and elderly, I mean, at this point, it's if you're over 65, I'm worried. And I've been around enough people also in my community within the last year or so who've lost parents. So there's a number of issues that come up when we think about really what our mission is about building wealth. And how do you prepare for that? Because it's not a single sort of, shot deal. You don't take a workshop. You don't just do, one thing and then all of a sudden you're like building wealth. No, it's a long-term over time, and there's many elements, what we call estate planning, things that include elder care, that include insurance, that include sort of trust. And right now it may not be affecting you, but it's important not only in time of crisis, but as you start to build wealth. It is actually one of the biggest wealth building tools we have. And so today I wanted to talk about that because there's so many people in our community. If you look around at the Latinx and African American communities of color are getting hit hard in this, and they will be, and they already have a disparate sort of racial impact in terms of wealth building. And so we want to make sure that people know what they need to do to prepare in case someone gets sick in this time, in case there's a passing, what can they do? What do they need to prepare? So Veronica, I want you to take it away and get us started. And I think if you can focus sort of what are the takeaways? What are the 3 things that people need to be doing or conversations they need to be having with people in their immediate families or in their sort of care community, and particularly sort of power of attorney, health directives, right? We've heard that most people are going in to hospitals and no one's able to join them, which means that a lot of people, maybe their wishes aren't being observed. So if you could just kind of walk us through some of that and tell us a little bit about what you focus on in your firm and sort of elder care.
Sure. So again, thank you so much for having me today. I am an elder and special needs law and trust and estates attorney, and I practice in the state of New York, specifically in New York City. And what I do basically is put people in a better place than how I found them. And to me, that's the significance of estate planning and elder law. Trust and estates is the foundation for elder law and other areas of law that are specifically related to it. There would be no elder law if there wasn't trust and estates. And you said something a few minutes ago, and I just want to expand on it. We're in a time of emergency in this country, and it's only now that issues of life and death, estate planning is coming to the forefront. In a non-pandemic time, these topics are sort of bottom of the barrel, not to be discussed, something that you can push off to a later date. And what I want people to understand is that we sometimes don't have a tomorrow. We don't have a later. We may not have an opportunity to do these documents. So I think it's great, and it's weird to say it this way, that this pandemic, these life and death emergencies that are happening all around us are making us talk about our mortality and really bringing to the surface the real things, the things that are truly important and that should be discussed readily, but for cultural, religious, and other issues, they're not talked about. So it's a discussion that should be happening in your 20s, in your 30s, in your 40s, and in your 50s. It's not a discussion that should be relegated to when you're about to retire or when you're older. And far too often, I have people coming to me when they're already post-retirement, when they're in their 70s and 80s, and they've never planned. And so my objective as a practitioner is to have people think about these issues early, because your estate planning, like so many other things in your life, evolve just like you do. So you have certain needs in your life when you're in your 20s. And then when you're in your 30s, you're not the same person. You don't have the same life outlook. So your planning has to evolve just like you do. And if a person gets into the habit of planning from an early age, then it becomes something that's a part of their life and something that they give time to do. It becomes important. And so you don't have to be in the situation like so many people are now, where they're literally running to lawyers to get their healthcare proxies done, the powers of attorney, and the last will and testament. Because it's always better to be proactive in these situations as opposed to reactive. Because proactivity means that you're taking charge and you're making clear decisions. When you're being reactive, when you're coming from a place of emotion, you're sometimes not thinking clearly, and you may not make the appropriate decisions. But let's just say that you've never planned a day in your life and now is the time to do it. I'm going to tell you why these documents are so important. The healthcare proxy, and you alluded to it about a minute ago, is a document that takes into effect, becomes valid when a person is incapacitated. And incapacity means different things to different people. It could be short-term incapacity, or it can be long-term. And basically, you as the principal give another person who's called the agent the authority to make medical decisions on your behalf. And the medical decisions run the gamut. They're from everyday decisions like doctor's appointments, medications, diagnostic exams, to minor or major medical procedures. And on the other end of the spectrum, you're looking at end-of-life decision-making. So are you going to withdraw or refrain from artificial nutrition, hydration, mechanical or artificial respiration? What are you willing to do? Are you willing to have your life prolonged? What conditions do you want met before they stop life-saving measures? So it's a document that runs the gamut, but it's incredibly important. And I tell people that they have to choose somebody who is level-headed, who is responsible, and who can make decisions under pressure. And the most important thing is that they are a person who puts your needs ahead of their own, because it's not about what they would want for you. They have to keep in mind the things that they know that you would want for yourself if you were ever in a situation where you were terminal, or you were never going to come back, or if you came back, you would never be able to live the life that you lived before. So I can't stress enough the importance of choosing the right agent and making sure that yeah, go ahead.
I have a question, a clarifying question for our audience. I would assume that most people think that if I'm married, that the sort of your health directive, the right, I guess, to a health directive is your spouse. Is that not true?
That's false. And I've been faced with that question many times. I've had people look at me and say, but like, that's my spouse. And I'm like, so? That has nothing to do with it. You know, hospitals are in the business of saving lives. They're not there to kill you. They're not there to try to hurt you. They will only take direction if there is a document or a court order that says that the person whose name appears on that document is the person who is authorized to make decisions on your behalf, because there's a real question of liability. Who are they taking orders from, and what authority does that person have to make these decisions? So being married to somebody means absolutely nothing to a hospital when they're considering life and death decisions, as well as the potential for a lawsuit. And that's reality.
And so, for example, especially during these times, let's say myself, someone I know has COVID at home, they're now getting to a point where they need to possibly go to the hospital. Would now be the time to say, okay, let me get my power of attorney together? Because some people are being intubated and they don't come out.
Well, it would be the healthcare proxy. The power of attorney is a totally different document. The power of attorney basically controls everything that's not healthcare related. So the power of attorney would be your finances, legal proceedings, public benefits, pension, social security, real estate, making gifts. So in terms of the healthcare proxy, if a person has COVID-19 and they are incapacitated, meaning they are unable to express their wishes, they're unable to communicate with the outside world, then that's when the healthcare proxy would take effect. The doctor will only abide by the healthcare proxy if the person, their patient, is unable to properly express their wishes. Like, for example, if they're already intubated or if they're in a coma. Once a person is intubated and in a coma, they're not able to tell you, no, I don't want this, yes, I want this. So at that point is when that healthcare proxy comes into effect.
Right. So it sounds like it would be beneficial, in fact, though, to be thinking about that if you are about to go to the hospital and you think there might be an chance that.
If you come down with COVID-19, and I don't care if your symptoms are minor, because we've all been watching the news where sometimes people have minor symptoms and all of a sudden they take a turn for the worse, or they have symptoms that persist for over a week and there's no improvement and they have to go to hospital. Once you have the symptoms, you absolutely should be considering having a healthcare proxy executed. I don't know about other jurisdictions or states, but New York, because of our governor, is now permitting remote notarization of documents as well as remote witnesses. So that's a game changer, especially during a time like this when the courts are not functioning at full capacity, when most of us as professionals are working remotely, and when people are being told you can't leave your house. So there are ways around it, and a healthcare proxy can be effectuated. So there's no excuse, even during a pandemic.
Great, great. So tell us a little bit about the role of the power of attorney then, and in this context, and should everyone have a power of attorney? I mean, if you have children,
Absolutely.
I mean, under what circumstances?
The power of attorney, basically, this is how I tell my clients when they're sitting in my office or when I give presentations that are similar to this. Think about all the things that you do on a daily basis, from the moment you wake up, when you go to work, and when you come back. So you might go to the bank, you go to work, you come back, you might go online and pay bills. You may make phone calls because you're disputing a bill that you got in the mail. Think about the possibility of you not being able to do those things. You can't defend yourself. You cannot advocate for yourself. That's why the power of attorney is such an important document. It can be as narrowly tailored or as expansive as you wish it to be. And it's a document that, if it's put in the wrong hands, can also be abused. So the same criteria that I mentioned earlier, when you execute a power of attorney, you need to make sure that you choose somebody who's responsible, someone who's on solid financial ground, and someone who understands what a fiduciary duty is. When you are an agent under a power of attorney, your duty is to make decisions that are in the best interest of the principal, the person that named you. It's not an opportunity to enrich yourself. It's not an opportunity to steal. But I can't underscore enough the importance of a power of attorney, because it's basically all the things that we do that we normally take for granted. So let's say, for example, you are in an incapacitated state and the hospital is having a dispute with your insurance company. The agent under the power of attorney would be the person to step in and have dialogue with the insurance company. If there's a problem with a bill from a hospital, it would be your agent that steps in to dialogue with the hospital. If there's a problem with your rent because it's not getting paid, it would be your agent who dialogues with the landlord. So, I mean, I could go on and on and on, but basically the agent under the power of attorney is stepping in your shoes and becomes you.
Sure.
While you're incapacitated.
We have a quick question. I'm going to try to take most questions at the end, but we do have one that's related to power of attorney. Sure. From Ms. Espinosa over here. Can you have more than one power of attorney?
No. You can have more than one agent under the power of attorney. So for example, you may want your mother and your sister to be your agents and to handle your affairs. So you can name more than one person, but no more than two. You can also name a person or persons as alternates in the event that one or two people are unavailable, either because they're physically unavailable or they can no longer do the job. But you cannot have more than one power of attorney for the reasons that I stated before. It's a really powerful document. So imagine the damage that somebody could do to you financially or otherwise if there's one person walking around with one document and one person walking around with the other one. It's just not done. And typically, let's say that in 2015, you executed a power of attorney and you have a falling out with the person that you named as your agent. So in 2020, you go to an attorney, you execute a new one. Once you do that, you have to formally inform your agent via certified mail, via letter, that that power of attorney has been revoked. So there's a whole process when you revoke a power of attorney and you execute a new one. You can only have one, but you can have more than one agent and they can act separately on your behalf.
Oh, sorry. That's very important. Thank you for that. I'm thinking about, look, me and my sister are, 10 years apart, so we both have played different roles in my parents' life. And so sort of that becomes a kind of issue, particularly, look, most of us have very big families and there's probably a lot of people who think they should be in control. So it's a huge one. We have some questions on that, but I want to move to Renee very quickly, and then that way we can then bring back the conversation. Look, I just want to let everybody know also that there are so many issues that need to be covered, and we're going to make this into a series and bring these ladies back on to have further conversations about estate planning, wills, trust, and other things that we're not going to be able to cover in this hour. This hour is really dedicated to sort of like real COVID issues and sort of what needs to be done right now. Thank you, Veronica. That was really helpful to get us started. And we're going to come back in a little bit to you. So I want to now just turn to Renee. Like I said, Renee works in insurance. She's sort of a guru of like life insurance and sort of estate planning on the financial side coming out of LA. And so look, Renee, I know that there's probably tons of people right now making wills at home, doing it online through Zoom or Nolo or some of these other legal Zoom, that is, not this Zoom. Yeah. And, so there's lots of things that are happening right now. People are starting to worry about these predicaments that we're in. What are the things that they should be thinking about? What kind of calls are you getting? And just sort of walk us through generally sort of, here's a term insurance, here's life insurance, sort of universal. Here's what you need to be asking. Make sure your beneficiaries are updated, etc.
Yeah, well, thanks again, Ramona, for having me and to piggyback on Veronica. The area that I specialize in is financial planning, and a component of financial planning is the risk management, and it's really the foundational piece. A lot of people really do want to talk about the fun and sexy and their investments. How do I grow what I currently have, and how do I get somewhere from point A to point B with money? But the type of conversations and my philosophy around planning is the foundational piece is really is the risk management. How are you protecting yourself? How do you protect not only yourself but your family? I always equate it to, if you're looking for a home and you're looking at all the different pieces of what you want in a house, and the most overlooked part of it is probably the foundation. The concrete is boring, it's nondescript, but in your financial life, that is your risk management, your life insurance, your disability insurance, your long-term care, your estate plan, and how do all those pieces fit together? So I don't execute upon the estate planning documents like Veronica does, but I help people make sure that they have a strategy in place to fund that estate plan. So it is the life insurance and all of those different pieces. And so especially in this period of time, just like Veronica said, it's obviously it's a crisis that we're going through. But if we're going to, listen, I'm sitting here in Los Angeles where it is raining, but I'm originally from New York. I've, grew up in New York. I grew up on Long Island. I'm a New Yorker at heart. I've just chased the warmer weather in my adult life. But so I have family members that are, experiencing, this in real time in New York. But even out here where it's not as bad, but it's real life. And it puts in perspective what you need to get done. And the kind of calls that I've had is that this was on my back burner, and what do I need to do? What kind of insurance makes sense? So when it comes to life insurance, I think the foundational piece and the question you need to ask is, what are my needs? And then it's understanding what your needs are that can help you determine how much insurance you need. And then from there, what type of life insurance you need. Do you need term insurance, which is, I always equate that as the renting of the apartment. And for those of us that are living in Los Angeles or New York, we're probably doing that more than owning the property. But if we're renting the insurance, then it's only for a period of time, whether that is for 20 years, for 15 years, for 30 years. All the carriers have different different time horizons around that, but they're usually around 15, 20, 30 years. And so sometimes a lot of people will think about it, well, I only need insurance as I'm either paying off a mortgage or as my kids are growing, or, and maybe just for a finite period of time. But I think as I'm finding over, especially in this period of time, is that people are scared that their life insurance is expiring in a few years. And what happens if their life insurance expires in 8 years and they really still, and this happened 10 years from now, and they don't have life insurance? So that is where making sure that you're thinking about your needs, just like Veronica said, your needs are going to evolve from your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, your 50s. And the reality with life insurance, the older you get, the more expensive it is. So you're turning 45 on Saturday, I'm 41, about to be 41 and a half. If we were to get the same amount of insurance, apply for the same amount of insurance as a 30-year-old today, we would be exponentially more expensive for that same amount of insurance. So I think a lot of people in their younger years, they don't think about it, but you also have to think about it. Well, maybe I don't have kids. Maybe I don't own property, but do I have parents that are financially relying on me? Do I have grandparents that are financially relying on me? God forbid something happened to me. They're now financially enabled to take care of things. So I think like I said, I think the foundational part is, what are your needs? And then understanding what type of life insurance. And just like renting, or just like renting the apartment versus owning the home, there's going to be a cost difference around that. And I think sometimes people may have encountered life insurance agents. And as much as I specialize in insurance, I really take the vantage point of being completely unbiased and making sure that you're doing what's right for people, and not thinking that insurance is the only thing that is a solution for your needs. It's making sure that people it's not just about slinging a product at you. It's making sure that it fits in the context of your overall plan and your needs, and how does that plan evolve over time.
That's right. I think a couple of points that are really important. Look, I'm a single mom, and I know that one of the things I bought in law school, thanks Fordham, and Veronica's a Fordham law alum as well, is that, I bought insurance policy. I bought an insurance policy when I was in my 30s, because I figured if I had no other wealth to pass on, at least I had that.
Yeah.
And that was really important. And I come from a family where I will be the first person, in generationally speaking, to ever receive wealth passed down from my mom when she passes, God forbid. But so that's really important in terms of wealth building, because that is how wealth is built in America. It is passed down.
Yep.
Right? It's that inter vivos, there's a lot of ways. And again, this is just sort of the first stage, and we're going to talk a lot more about that in the coming weeks, and that's why we're going to have you come back on to talk a little bit more about that. But I think it's really important, because a GoFundMe campaign is not a plan.
It's
not. And I see this in
not.
communities of color all the time, whether it's fire, apartment that caught on fire, or the primary caregiver passed away, or even that auntie, that tia, she passed away, or she now needs, assistance, where is that money coming from? The last thing that I want folks to be struggling with is, how do I bury my loved one? Okay. And so that means even $10,000 in coverage and $25,000 in coverage is going to make a lot of difference in your ability to recover from that moment. And so, like you said, there are now options available for people in life insurance. It's not sort of old school. I mean, you got the term. Now you can get some term online. If you're young enough, you don't need to go through a health sort of screening. For older people now, there's more sort of people like Renee in the world who actually care about what's going on, and it's not about just slinging a product. Look, we all know that insurance brokers have notoriously, but look, lawyers are too. So what can we say?
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about, Renee, really quickly, what are one or two things that people should be doing right now? If I don't have a will and I have, children, or maybe I don't have children, I have a will, what should I write something up? Should I kind of do it ad hocly? And then two, how quickly can I get insurance if I'm thinking about it? It's top of mind right now. And then if you do have it, tell us about sort of making sure we identify the right people, very similar to what Veronica talked about in terms of identifying a trusted person, the right person, etc. You also want to make sure your beneficiaries on your life insurance are the right people.
Yep.
Can I just broach something momentarily? You mentioned just a minute ago the possibility of a person drafting their own will. Is that what you asked?
Well, she said ad hoc, but yeah, Veronica.
Yes, right. So I've had people ask me, should I, can I do this? Should I just put something together?
No, the short answer is no. And it's because you as a layperson, as a non-lawyer, do not have the training, nor do you have an understanding of the law that goes into the drafting of a will. And in my career, I've seen plenty of instances where people will either write their own wills, or even worse, they will draft the will for their own parent, which is a big no-no, because that's, number one, you can't do that. You can't be involved in any sort of document drafting where you're either a possible executor or a beneficiary. So there's a lot of ethical issues that come into play when a person even attempts to draft their own will. And also just the high probability of people making, not even drafting mistakes, just mistakes, period. So the short answer is no. There are lawyers out there, experienced like myself, at every price point that are available to help a person write even the simplest of wills. And I think that what a lot of people fall into is the trap of, well, I don't have enough assets. I don't have anything to leave behind. I don't need a will. Everybody has assets. The value that you give it is relative. Somebody's, one story ranch is another person's mansion. So everybody has assets, and you owe it to yourself to go to a person who knows how to draft a will to have it done properly. Because if it's not drafted properly, you're not facing a probate, you're facing an estate administration, you're facing intestacy. So I always say, don't be a penny wise, because you end up being a pound foolish.
Right. And we're going to return to that in a minute, because I do want to ask you about sort of what people should be thinking about. I don't want people to get ripped off either.
Sure.
I want to make sure that, and we want to give a price point, especially for folks in our community who, don't, especially right now, who don't have a lot of money. And I think it's really important to understand why I brought these two women on, because if you have life insurance, you have an asset.
It's a non-probate asset.
It's a non-probate asset.
It's a non-probate.
No, that's right. They are actually two different types of, let's say, contract. There's separation. But the fact is that these two go hand in hand. So Renee, again, if people need life insurance right now, can they get it? Yep. What's your advice to folks?
Well, I think that, going through this period of time, I think it's a good time to just really take an assessment of what are your needs, and now really make sure that you have an emergency plan in place, a family emergency plan. A family doesn't necessarily mean to have a spouse and kids. It means Who are your cousins? Who are your aunts, your uncles, your parents, your grandparents? What kind, and have these conversations with, your elders as well. So you can understand what is already in place. If you need life insurance from a financial, what life insurance fundamentally is a financial Band-Aid. It is to provide income and in a tax-free dollars to people that are financially relying on you. Now, yes, you can use that life insurance in a strategic wealth accumulation way, which is probably separate, but fundamentally that's what a death benefit is. And a lot of people don't realize that you get that life insurance death benefit. It is tax-free because of the tax code around life insurance. So that adds to your wealth accumulation point, Ramona, because when people do leave money behind, even if it's just a little bit, it leaves something for the next person to invest, to do something with, and to continue to build from there. If you need life insurance, you can apply for life insurance. There's so many different carriers out there. It's important, though, to do it with a reputable company. And how financially strong is that company? Because if you have term insurance, it's super cheap because most people are outliving their term.
Yep.
Most people it's just really just that hammock or that net underneath you. God forbid there is a premature death. The reality is most people are not going to prematurely die, but it's super cheap. It gives you that safety net, but most people are going to outlive that. So you do want to do that with a reputable company, because what happens if that company goes under? Then there is no payout. Two, it does require any insurance in your life, whether it is health insurance, whether it is life insurance, disability insurance, long-term care. It is all predicated on an individual's age, sex, and health. So you do have to jump through some hoops, because if every insurance company just accepted every single 41-year-old female, then there is no differentiation between who's healthy and who's not. How many claims are they going to have to pay? So you want that insurance company to also not just be taking any single person. So I do believe that it is important to go through some health related questions so you can understand the integrity of your insurance as well. But it's fairly easy. Listen, it's the industry has been migrating from the old archaic way to doing things online electronically. I do so much applications, that online medical questionnaire. It's just a link that you can securely fill out yourself. The online applications that you can e-signature, it literally takes days. And then and most insurance carriers will conditionally cover you during the underwriting process. So God forbid something happened to you in that underwriting process, you're considered, covered. And then at the end of the underwriting process, you always get back together. My practice is I get back together and say, this is how the insurance company evaluated the application. Do you want it, or do we need to make any changes, or do you not want it at all? And it's always your right to not accept it. But that's the process. And just to add to that one point, I think the reality is as you get older, it gets more expensive. So I have a lot of people, especially now, that are coming to me like, my parents don't have life insurance, or these people, I need them, they've never had life insurance. Can we get them life insurance? The reality is that post 60, 61, it becomes expensive. So now it becomes a different type of product, because that term insurance really just financially does not make sense.
That's great. That was a really good overview, I think. And it's really important. Again, our audience, remember, is sort of, I would say late stage millennial,
Yeah.
the mature millennial. And the reason we're having this conversation is also to remind people, particularly in the Latino community, we more than likely are going to end up taking care of our parents. I always joke, sort of true, which is that our parents think that, I provided for you, I sent you to school, now it's your time to take care of me. That's their retirement plan. And so, how do we even, given those circumstances, make sure that we're doing what we need to do on our end? And for younger folks, what do they need to be doing now? Because, and again, it's in your 30s when this is stuff that you should be thinking about. And it's going to save you a lot of money if you think about it earlier, and it's going to save you a lot of heartache if you start taking care of these things and having these conversations with your parents, with your family, and having that plan. I want to
Sorry, my line with insurance because I think, like, you know, it's always the last thing that people think about, but I always say it's buying pennies to buy a dollar.
Right.
You know, like but having a $25 term insurance for yourself, for that peace of mind, for a few $100s for the year, you'll ultimately buy dollars on that and the peace of mind around that. So not
Right.
sorry to interrupt you, but
No, no, absolutely. It's a conversation. I want people to get as much as information as they can. I am going to quickly turn to my good friend, another Veronica, coming out of Los Angeles. And the reason I invited Veronica to just give a couple of minutes about sort of her experience is that Veronica recently was a caretaker for a number of years for her father who's passed, and had to make a career transition because of it. And not only is she a mental health provider herself and a highly educated PhD, but she would tell me about sort of how hard it was to navigate the system, caretaking for an elder sick parent. And some of what I wanted her to share, more importantly, are what are the things that she wished she would have known. One, you know, what could she have done differently, right? So Veronica, why don't you share a little bit of your story and sort of how you kind of helped your father navigate the system, and that I think will help to kind of highlight some of the issues we've been talking about here, and then bring us to a question and answer period.
One thing that I wish I wish I would have known is that my employer did not take care of me during this time. They tell you that they're with you, they'll make accommodations, and they didn't. So my father had a kidney failure, so he was on dialysis for about 10 years, and I was working with LA Unified School District, and I was able to care for him for a certain time, but then he started becoming chronically and consistently ill, and I needed to start taking more sick time. So I ran through all my sick time hours. I wish I would have had some type of disability insurance or some type of paycheck coverage insurance, because when I had to go, I ended up leaving, going on a leave because I ran through all my sick time. My dad was getting ill. My mother wasn't able to support him. But as far as all the Veronica Escobar was talking about, the healthcare proxy, power of attorney, fortunately I had all that because I'm the only daughter. So but I still had the power of attorney, and he was being seen at Cedars-Sinai. So they were good about providing us with all the documentation for us to sign while he was alive, to inform them how he wanted to be cared for, and whether or not he wanted to be on life support. So we had all that in place. I don't have any siblings, so I didn't have to negotiate or struggle with that. My mother divorced my father about 5 years before that, so she was not, they got back together though, so we were all a family, but I didn't need to negotiate even that with my mother, because my mother told me, you handle everything. So I had these conversations with my dad about, he had an order to do not resuscitate, and so it was easier for me in that I was able to check my dad out of certain hospitals and nursing homes, which is very important right now, because I'm wondering, with all these seniors in nursing homes right now, where are their family members? Sometimes I would just kind of I wonder, and I'm not judging because everybody's situation is different, but I would go take my dad out if I were somebody right now. I did it twice myself. I did it. Once on the west side, and over here on the east side. I checked my parent out, and they called security. The hospital manager, the hospital director, and I knew my rights. I had all my paperwork worked out, and I said, "You have 15 minutes to get my dad ready to go, because I need to take him somewhere else." And I was able to check him out, and even when my dad passed, he told me, I'm done. And I told him, just give me a couple, let me handle this right now. I actually asked him for 3 weeks. And so So this is how we would negotiate with my dad. I asked, give me 3 weeks. Let me get my class settled in because I'm a professor at Cal State LA. I told him, give me 3 weeks. Let me get my class settled in, and then we'll do this together because you're ready. And I told him that I would respect I would respect his opinion, his right to self-determine when he wanted to end his life. So after 3 weeks, he started getting ill again, and he told me, "This is it." And I said, "This is it." So, so I was able to sign everything. We planned for hospice at Cedars-Sinai, which is a great hospital.
Mhm.
I mean, that hospital just. It was challenging for us too, because at that time I lost my job. I lost my job. I ended up leaving my organization. I felt a discrimination charge, and I didn't win, but I didn't lose. But I didn't have an income. I didn't have an income
Right.
at
So the
that year.
caretaking costs so much money. And I think that's
Yeah.
something that we don't think about, is that the lost income of caretaking. And I know that, Renee, we have talked a little bit about this, and I believe that, something I want to actually figure out, maybe we just have another conversation, because I know there's lots of options and they're very complicated. But Veronica, just very quickly, Veronica, over to go on. Did you struggle at all with the sense of trying to navigate Medicaid? And were there any issues also around language? Because both of your parents are immigrants. I mean, I think your father was an American citizen at this point, but to what extent, as a daughter of immigrants, like how you navigated the system in terms of.
Fortunately, I know the system because I'm a social worker. So he was very well protected in that sense. So he had a Medicare, Medicaid insurance. He was well taken care of. I advocated for him to get into Cedars-Sinai. Pulled him out of St. Vincent's Hospital in Cedars-Sinai. Took our case in their renal transplant department, and so the insurance actually was very supportive with us. But what we still had a lot of out-of-pocket expenses. Like we still had to reconstruct our bathroom because we weren't able to lift him into the toilet. We had to install handrails. We had to hire a cleaning lady. We had to buy orthopedic shoes, high quality clothing. We had to we had to pay for food, parking, $25 parking at Cedars-Sinai every day, food every day in Beverly Hills, gas, sometimes hotel expenses to be around there. Even veterinary expenses for my father, because now he couldn't pay for the veterinary expenses, and he loved his dog. So like all of that added up, and I didn't have a job. So around that time.
Yeah, no, this is exactly the kind of thing that I think good sort of planning can help to alleviate, right? I mean, there's certain types of insurances. I mean, when I've been in a bind, we actually took a loan out of my mom's insurance policy, right? I mean, that's like, I didn't even think about that. But if you have a long enough policy, you can borrow against it. I mean, there's all types of different things that you can do. And I know that your mom had bought burial insurance, and so that was able to cover that. We did have a question, and I want to now sort of move into the Q&A, and also note that Veronica Escobar, the lawyer, also you provide your resources in Spanish too, and I think that's really important to let people know. And Renee, I'm sure if you don't, you work with people who do, because I think that's actually really important, especially when people are communicating and around these kinds of issues, that they even if they speak English, they want to be able to communicate with people in their own language.
Veronica's story resonates a lot with me because, as you mentioned, I am bicultural, I'm bilingual, and a lot of my clients are Spanish speaking. Veronica had, I think, the fact that she is an assertive person and she's an educated woman, that she knew what to do, she knew what to say, and she knew how to fight for her father. But there are a lot of people who come from backgrounds similar to hers and mine that don't understand what they're getting into. They are intimidated by the fact that they may not speak perfect English. They may be intimidated by the people around them and the titles that they have. And when my father was sick, and my father was on hospice, you know, I'm a lawyer and my mother speaks pretty good English. We were able to navigate the system differently because of my level of education and experience, but not all immigrants and not all people who belong to immigrant communities have those benefits. And so her story resonates a lot with me because she's right. It is a minefield. Yes, it's expensive. Yes, there are expenses that you can't even foresee when you're caretaking for a person. The estimate is, and you know, Renee may have figures as well, for somebody who's 42 like me, I will need to have at least $2 million either liquid or somewhere invested in order to finance my own long-term care, whether it's aging in place or aging in an assisted living or a nursing home. God saved me from a nursing home, but that's another webinar. I don't want to go to a nursing home, but that's how much you need. And 2/3 of Americans do not have the proper nest egg to finance their own care, because financing your own care is freedom. That's choice. And when you get to hire and fire at will because you're not being taken care of, that's power. And unfortunately, in a lot of immigrant communities, they're at the mercy of Medicaid. They're at the mercy of these facilities where they try. I'm not going to say that all of them are bad, but they're understaffed, they're overworked, they're not compensated properly, and they have to take care of all these older people. If you think that they're going to take care of you like they would take care of you at home, you're sadly mistaken. I mean, so Veronica brought up so many interesting points, and that's another webinar altogether. And specifically,
That's the long-term care. Oh, sorry, Veronica. That's, you know, that's where
long-term care insurance, and that game is even changing because the insurance companies, and Renee obviously knows more, people are living really long. You know what I mean? And so now you don't get traditional long-term care policies. You get term with a long-term care rider. I mean, all these different products that are coming out to address the concerns about long-term care, because getting old in America is really expensive. And if you think that your country is going to take care of you, no. Because Veronica said, did my employer take care of me? No, your country's not going to do it either. It's up to you.
Well, in order to qualify, and this is probably obviously a different webinar, in order to qualify for some of those government, that person needs to make sure all of their assets is spent down. So
and that's where the Medicaid planning comes in. That's where the Medicaid planning comes in, and those requirements are really stringent. And a lot of people from immigrant communities, and even people who have roots here, they don't understand it. And it goes back to my initial point. People think they have time. People think that they can put these things off. You can't. You can't. And if you make planning a part of your life, you already know what's coming and you can plan accordingly. I mean, so, you know, I hope that this webinar has been instructive for people, because I'm even listening to people like Veronica, it resonates so much with me because it's what I deal with on a daily basis. So I like listening to other people's perspectives because we can always learn.
So I have a question. I do want to get to some of the questions, but we do have them building up over here in the chat room. This is for Renee in terms of insurance. And I get this question a lot. People who are either in mixed families, meaning immigrant status. So one, is insurance available for sort of undocumented folks? And, you know, if there is a sort of one parent's, you know, a citizen and the other parent is not, what should folks be doing? And maybe it's an increase in amount of the policy, et cetera. So if you can just answer that question.
Yeah, I mean, I get this question a lot as well. You know, if it's a citizenship, you know, there are carriers that will insure non-citizens. So you know, everyone's situation is going to be unique, but there are loopholes around that, or there's carriers that will help that will insure. If it's a mixed issue where one parent is insurable, the other parent isn't, then that's where we're going to look at either how much more insurance we should have on one parent versus the non-insurable parent. And if that parent, the non-insurable parent, if they're working for a company that does provide benefits, although what's highlighted in this country right now is that people that have been laid off, they lose all their benefits. So it's always important not to fully rely on your employer benefits like life insurance, disability insurance, your health care, but that's just some, you know, more so the life insurance and disability insurance you can get privately more so than the health care if you have that through your employer. But If you do work for a company that offers this, then that's where we look to maximize that benefit and pay through the group plan, because group coverage doesn't make you go through the underwriting hoops that you need for private insurance. That's usually just a marriage of, you know, what kind of coverage do we kind of fit together to give your family the need, or to satisfy the need as best as we can.
Right. Great. So that's good to know. I think that there's a lot of confusion around that, and particularly in families where immigration status is an issue. Just, I don't know if you know this offhand, but what if the beneficiary is undocumented?
You know, it's a good question. I'm not 100% sure. That's something that I will have to double check, and I can obviously maybe pass that information along to you, because every carrier has different qualifications and different rules. So I don't know if there's really a universal answer to that. So I don't want to misspeak.
Sure.
But I also find that a lot of people they forget to update their beneficiaries. And I had someone that just this literally happened to. So that's also something to look at, is making sure at least on an annual basis, is that your beneficiaries are who you want them to be in that moment.
Yes, I've had this conversation with people. For example, if your father perhaps had a plan, he had an insurance policy, and he was married, and then maybe got divorced, and then he got remarried. You know what I'm talking about. And someone wasn't taken off a beneficiary list, there's a possibility that person, that ex, could still receive money. So these are the things. I mean, a beneficiary, again, is just the sort of the folks who are going to be getting allocation out of that will. If so, you know, my sister, my son, I want 50-50, I want, you know, 75-25. When you open up an insurance account, or when you get a policy, it's going to ask you who your beneficiaries are. So we have another question from Sabrina, and she says, I'm healthy, I'm in my 30s. Is it acceptable to get a will and a power of attorney and things like that?
It's 100% acceptable. It's 100% okay. It's something that you should be doing.
That's right.
You should be doing, no ifs, ands, or buts. And this is something that I tell my clients. You never want to leave the people that you love a mess to clean up when you're incapacitated or you're no longer here with us. It's your responsibility as an adult to manage your affairs. And part of showing respect and love for yourself and the people that you love is getting your affairs in order. So as a 30-year-old, let me say this, you could become incapacitated tomorrow, God forbid. Like right now, you're fine. But I can't say what will happen when you walk out the door, because we only have promise today. We don't have promise tomorrow. So absolutely, as a 30-something-year-old healthy woman, this is the time for you to make clear-headed decisions about who do you want to manage your affairs if something happens to you, who do you want to take care of you, and who do you want to have your things. You never want to leave these decisions to a court to make for you, because it may be something that you never envisioned for yourself. So while you have the power in your own hands to make decisions about your own life, you need to take advantage of that. So absolutely 100%.
And I always say it's the greatest gift you can give to your family.
It is.
Because how many of us have family members that we've seen fight, who've fallen out because it was always about money and who left someone this and how I had to take care of someone, and you didn't take care of them the way that I took care of them. So to have that all tied up is the greatest gift you can give your family.
Absolutely.
Your family.
We actually just brought on Sabrina to ask a question, because you did have a two-part question around some disability. So might as well go ahead, Sabrina, ask your question. Hello? Let's see, unmute. I'm unmuting you. Okay, there we go. I can hear you now.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for asking the first part of my question, which was about the will and power of attorney. I appreciate you answering that. My second part of the question would be more for Renee and thinking about insurance. I don't necessarily think frequently about insurance as a 30-something have a ton of assets right now. I don't have kids. I don't have a spouse. And in this case, I feel like I have enough money set aside to be buried and whatnot if something, God forbid, something happened. But I had never actually thought about the long-term care piece. But how essential is insurance for someone that would be in my position? Or what type of insurance would you kind of direct people to look at?
Great question. I think, when it comes to the life insurance piece, even if you don't have assets or, a spouse, kids, and people financially relying on you, I think it's also looking, and in this moment, if you have the assets to bury you, great. But it's also looking and having the foresight ahead. Are those things that you do want in life? Do you foresee having a mortgage, even if it's not a kid's or a spouse? Because the earlier you get life insurance, the cheaper it is. If you end up not needing life insurance, you can always drop it. But, I think I think a lot of work and questions that I try to ask people is like, let's have foresight and not just think about what our life looks like in this moment. So we can be insured the way, because I've seen a lot of times, and I had this conversation last year with a 29-year-old who thought that he had time because he had 3 kids, and it was on the bottom of his list to do is to get life insurance. And yes, he did have kids and he had people financially relying on him. But finally, when he went to go implement life insurance, he found out that he's pancreatic cancer. And those are things where we think we're invincible. So it's looking and having that foresight. Especially for women, and this is
what about the long-term care, Renee? Because
Yeah.
I think that's really important, because that's a part of that question.
Yeah, the long-term care is really important. I think for us women, most importantly, is to be thinking about that as early as you can, because again, any insurance is cheaper today than it is tomorrow. The thing with long-term care is that you're probably going to be paying into the policy for a lot more years than you would be life insurance.
Yeah.
So then it's a matter of what are your resources and really what plan makes sense, because there are only a few insurance carriers in the market for long-term care. But especially for us women, whereas we're living longer, we're the ones in the nursing homes, we're the ones that are needing the caregiving.
Mm-hmm.
Or so. And to Veronica's point, it's not about being in the nursing home. How can I get care in my home is what long-term care is to look at it. And if your resources today allow you to support it and have a policy that right sizes your needs, then I say always to look at it and get it.
Right. This is not for this webinar, but it's going to be a part of this series. Is also folks that are caretaking for disabled children.
Oh yeah.
Or lifelong children who have illness. I mean, and it can be anything from autism to severe disability. Unfortunately, it's not for this conversation, but it is going to be a part of our series. So I invite you ladies back to talk to us about that. There's both legal repercussions and both financial repercussions there. It is 5 o'clock, so it is our time. We will take maybe one more question. Someone just pinged us. Let's see. Do these type of documents govern short-term care? Say I'm in the ICU on a ventilator and someone needs to make a mortgage payment out of my account.
They do. POAs, that's the short form for power of attorney, and the healthcare proxy are only valid during a period of incapacity. So it can be short-term or it can be long-term. So let's just say you have an accident and you're unconscious or you're in a coma, you obviously can't make your wishes known. So your agent under the power of attorney would step into your shoes and do all the things that you would do. So if you have rent to be paid, they would make sure that it got paid. If there are utilities that needed to be paid, they would do it. In terms of the healthcare proxy, any decisions regarding treatment, surgeries, medications, the agent under that document would be able to make the decisions. Once you regain capacity, and we're assuming it's a short-term incapacity situation, then you just regain control and you're able to make your own decisions. So these documents are only valid during life and only during incapacity. Once a person passes away, they're no longer valid.
Great. Thank you so much. So we are going to share a recap of this conversation. It's been taped, so account holders will have access to it. We will also share your individual contact information for your businesses. I'm sure that a lot of people are going to have further questions. So we're so excited to be able to share that with our community. And thank you all very much for joining and for our experts in this field. So important. So thank you very much for joining us today, and look forward to doing a number more of these webinars on these important topics.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Have a good one. Stay safe and stay healthy, everyone.
Stay healthy.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.